So now if you remember, POCO is an independent brand just like Redmi. So you don't see these under Xiaomi now. There are brands now we call as independent, but still they use the same UI and they are still taken care by the parent company. But still, now if you're considering one of the phones, you should see it as a separate brand. We're talking about POCO versus Redmi. So we're talking about the Redmi Note 9 Pro, which is the newly launched smartphone. The 9 Pro and the 9 Pro Max were newly launched, and this against the POCO X2. So there's a lot of difference in the pricing because the POCO X2 is obviously priced higher. So if you're someone who's considering which phone to go with, in case you have a tight budget, and if you're thinking that, okay, if I should spend more than this and get something better, or is it okay to have something like the Redmi Note 9 Pro with my budget in the hand? Let's talk about that in this video. We'll only talk about the major things where what are you going to lose out on if you are considering the Redmi Note 9 Pro, and if you're spending more, what are you getting on the POCO X2? Obviously, with this, you could easily understand that I'm saying that the POCO X2 is a better phone. But what are the differences? Let's talk about that. Now with the display, it's actually the same. It's a Full HD Plus resolution display on both of them. 6.67 inch is the screen size, Gorilla Glass 5 protection, IPS LCD, and HDR10 support is present on the POCO X2. That's one difference, and the other difference is it comes with a 120Hz refresh rate. So that's one major difference between the two phones. So 120Hz refresh rate is going to make things much smoother in the interface as well, not just with the supported apps or games, but also with the interface. This one, the Redmi Note 9 Pro, comes with the 60Hz display, and it's not more than that. So the refresh rate is a difference here. The 120Hz refresh rate is actually going to be better for you. Now with the performance, it's a Snapdragon 730G on the POCO X2 and Snapdragon 720G on the Redmi Note 9 Pro. The difference here is that although they are almost the same, the CPU is faster on the Redmi Note 9 Pro. That's the Snapdragon 720G. Interesting change here, the Redmi Note 9 Pro's chipset, it's actually a later one with a previous generation number, 720. So it's faster CPU but a slower GPU. So someone who's into gaming, though the graphic options that you're getting on these two phones is going to be the same on games like PUBG Mobile, on COD Mobile, on Fortnite and those kind of games, the graphic settings are going to be the same. But in the end, the performance should be better on the POCO X2 rather than that on the Redmi Note 9 Pro. The Redmi Note 9 Pro should give you a similar performance on the day-to-day usage, though I feel it should be better because of the faster CPU. That is 2.3 GHz compared to 2.2 GHz. So that is one difference between the two. But in the day-to-day usage, it shouldn't really matter. So there's no huge difference in the performance of these two phones. But if you're again considering the POCO X2, remember that this comes with 6GB as the base variant. It doesn't come with less than that. So 6GB is the base variant for the POCO X2, and you're going to get 6+64 as the main option, and here it's 4+64 as the base one. So that's the one of the other differences between the performance or the variants that you get here. Next is the camera, where you should easily understand the POCO X2 is a much better phone when we talk about this particular aspect. It's a 64 megapixel camera. We have seen a wide range of phones in the market that have a 64 megapixel camera now. It was started with Realme's a couple of phones, then Redmi came up with the Redmi Note 8 Pro. So there were quite a few phones, but all of them had the Samsung GW1 sensor, not the famous Sony sensors. Sony's 48 megapixel IMX586 was one of the famous sensors in the recent past. Now Sony's IMX686 is what is coming on the back of the POCO X2. So that is one major difference or one huge upgrade for anyone who's had one of the previous phones from Redmi or POCO or anything. It's a 64 megapixel Sony IMX686 sensor compared to the Samsung GM2 sensor. That's a 48 megapixel camera on the Redmi Note 9 Pro. We haven't tested this out a lot, so I can't comment on how good the camera is, but it surely won't be able to compete with this one. That's the 64MP IMX686 sensor. I mean, I'm not talking about the megapixel count here. I can clearly say that Sony sensors, they are always made better for the best of the performances on the cameras. So that is the primary camera. Next, with the other ones, it's 8 megapixel wide angle camera, a 2 megapixel depth and 2 megapixel macro. So that is a similarity between the two phones, but the major one was the 64MP IMX686, which is going to be surely a better feature for someone who's considering the POCO X2. Now on the front as well, I'll show you how they look. So this is how the two phones look like on the front. So you see a dual camera on the POCO X2 and a single one on the Redmi Note 9 Pro. So the difference here is that the POCO X2 comes with two cameras where you have a 20 megapixel plus 2 megapixel combination, and that is surely an advantage here. So you again see one major difference there. With the selfie cameras, you see that it's a single versus dual combination, and not just that, it's a 20 versus 16 megapixel. So the resolution also is going to be different in this case. So that is one thing between the Redmi Note 9 Pro and the POCO X2, not just with the rear camera but also with the front facing camera. And now moving on to the battery, there's quite a major difference here. Actually, it's a 4500 mAh battery with the POCO X2, and compared to that there's a 5020 mAh battery on the Redmi Note 9 Pro. So that's rather not a compromise, because it's the same kind of a manufacturing process of the chipset, so the battery optimization is going to be almost the same. So MIUI and the battery optimization almost the same. So obviously we feel that the Redmi Note 9 Pro should have a better battery life, but the fast charging is not present. It's present, it's 18 watt, not so it's not as fast as what you see on the POCO X2, which has a 27 watt fast charging. So that's one major difference again. So you are not going to lose out on the battery. It's actually going to have a better battery on the Redmi Note 9 Pro, but the fast charging is something that you're going to lose out on. So it's an 18 watt versus 27 watt fast charging on the phones. So that's another difference between the POCO X2 and the Redmi Note 9 Pro. And the weight, it's actually 209 grams on the Redmi Note 9 Pro and 208 grams on the POCO X2. Remember that this has around 500 mAh battery extra, and still it's almost the same weight. So the reason for that is it comes with a plastic frame where the weight might have reduced a bit, and here it's an aluminum frame on the POCO X2. So the weight again brings out to the same weight here, and there's no difference in the weight, 209 versus 208. So it's a proper metal body, I mean the metal frame on the side, and a Gorilla Glass 5 protection on both the devices with a glass back, and on the front as well it's a Gorilla Glass 5 protected display. So these were the major differences between the POCO X2 and the Redmi Note 9 Pro. I can clearly say that in case you're someone who considers the battery life a lot, I would say the Redmi Note 9 Pro is going to have an amazing battery life. It has always been a case with the Redmi Note devices. The battery life won't be an issue at all, but you're going to lose out on the fast charging, you're going to lose out on the rear camera, the primary rear camera, and then the dual front facing camera, and also the 120Hz display. So these are the major differences between these two phones, and this is where you would lose out if you're considering the Redmi Note 9 Pro versus the POCO X2. So this was the comparison. I hope you like this video. If you do, share and subscribe to Gizmo Times for more. Thanks for watching, and see you next video.